Okay.
On the clock.
Yes, it is noon on the button. We are starting. My name is Deborah Olashansky. I serve as the Jewish Community Relations Director for the Jewish Federation of Nashville. Thank you all for joining us. We are thrilled to have as our guest today Vice Mayor Jim Shulman. He is a longstanding community member and a very dedicated member of both the Jewish and the greater community here. He has for 35 years been an invested member in our community, serving on boards in numerous organizations and being honored for his services. In 1999, he was elected to the Metro Council in the 25th District, where he served 2 four-year terms and chaired the Budget, Transportation, and Public Works Committees, prioritizing city funding, accountability, and emergency preparedness. In 2015, he was elected to the Metro Council as an at-large member and served in that position until May of 2018, when he was appointed as Nashville's vice mayor. So we are thrilled to have him today. We know his time is limited, and we very much appreciate him making the hour to spend with us. So Mr. Shulman, I will kick it off with our first question related to basically the state of the city vis-a-vis COVID-19. Where are we as a city? What are you thinking will happen in the next little while in regard to masking and other kinds of restrictions? And also, where are we in terms of hospital beds? How are we doing in terms of making sure that we have the medical facilities needed to address the crisis?
Thanks, Deborah, for having me. Thanks for people listening in today. So we get a lot of the information I get, the same source that you all get, and that is, you watch the media, you watch the news, but obviously I also talk to the people at the health department and anybody else who has basic information. I would say at this point that I'm worried about where everything is. Our numbers are high. Our hospital beds are low. This is happening across the state. It's also happening, obviously, in Nashville specifically. It was, I think everybody looked so forward to all the restrictions being lifted in, in March and April, when everybody said, okay, we got through that that first part of the pandemic. But as everybody remembers or should know, the pandemic didn't go anywhere. I mean, it wasn't like the virus just decided to leave because we decided that it was over. It was still around. It was just a matter of when it might catch back up to us, which I think would lead to some concerns that I have both with any type of, with all levels of government and everybody else. I mean, just because we had that, it seemed like we had that break in the pandemic, a lot of areas started shutting down their facilities. So if you notice, Metro went from a number of testing sites, I think, to one. General Hospital had a wing that basically was shut down, I believe, by the federal government because they didn't think we needed it anymore. Certain groups just, I think there was this feeling that we had gotten over it. The fairgrounds was another one. We had that as a site to house and shelter individuals who are experiencing homelessness, and who tested positive. So we started shutting all this stuff down. I think when you look back over it, we started way too soon. We should not have done that because we should have known that this might happen. Obviously, we're learning through a pandemic. We probably got our hopes up too quickly. So again, in terms of what I can tell you, same stuff you're all reading in the papers. Our hospital beds are, if they're not full, they're close. Lots of hospitalization of kids, and serious concerns about what these numbers are going to do. Now, long term, I heard from some folks yesterday in the healthcare industry that said, there's again a certain number of people that could be impacted by this next wave, because mostly you're seeing people who were not vaccinated that are ending up in the hospital, and so you've got a more limited number of people that could become infected. At least that's the thought. That's not to say that we all can't pick it up, even if we were vaccinated. But we'll see if those numbers come back down. I'd keep an eye on it for the next several weeks. We're watching it very closely. Changing that conversation into what's going on in the city. Obviously, the mayor a couple weeks ago said that if you're in a metro building, you got to wear a mask. Where I work, we instituted mask and said you have to wear a mask in here. We did that even before Metro did theirs. I would encourage everybody to be very, very cautious and very safe at this point, and do that if you can. The overall question, which some of you might then ask, is, okay, if you're all doing it, why don't you do it on a citywide basis? First of all, there is a resolution ordinance pending before the council to mandate that everyone 2 years of age plus wear it if you go inside a facility anywhere in Metro, with some exceptions. I'm not sure if we have the legal authority to do it. We might. The bigger challenge is, if we do have the legal authority, what does it mean if we pass it? Are we going to go arrest 3-year-olds for not wearing masks inside of stores? I don't think so. We can certainly encourage everyone to do it. And then, as my friend Avi would probably remind me, and that is that there is kind of an ongoing discussion between the city and the state about who has authority and so forth. And we've talked about schools, and there's this thing going on now. The federal government is now involved in discussions with Tennessee about, did the governor exceed his authority? Certainly an interesting time to be dealing with all this stuff, Deborah. That was a long answer to your question, but it's very confusing, and it's also very scary at this point.
So just to follow up a little bit, have you heard any discussions? I know in some states they've had to have field hospitals and things like that. Is there any worry in our city that we may need to turn to something like that?
I hadn't heard that yet. Now, what I will say is, so I saw the mayor on Wednesday. I see him once a week. There was no discussion about any type of field hospitals or anything else like that. I think he's obviously watching the numbers just like everybody else. I saw Dr. Jahanger on Tuesday night. I saw Dr. Gil Wright on Tuesday night. Everybody's being very, very careful and watching very carefully these numbers. If you remember, when we weren't sure where all this was going with COVID the first time through, we took one of the it must have been a ballroom at the city center and turned it into an 1,000-bed COVID unit. We never needed it. We didn't use it. So we have the capacity to do that again if we need to. Let's hope we don't have to. But I think we always stand ready to do it. And there's a push. I was doing some work this morning. There's a push to make sure that we have everything, or as much as we can, covered as quickly as we can in case this just keeps going up. So, and then I'll tell you, not to make things worse, but there's this Lambda variant that's coming behind it. And so we're watching that too. So this is going to be with us for a while, particularly because, you've still got a pretty large group that won't get vaccinated. So, and because they're not, we can't get to that level where we're in much better shape.
Well, yeah, sadly, this is going to be with us for a while. I would agree with you on that. And as we've been saying in our planning, I feel like the only thing that's certain is the uncertainty. And we just have to keep our eyes and ears and try to stay a step ahead as best as possible.
Right.
I'm going to turn it to my friend Avi Poster for the next question. Avi, if you're ready. And also, before I do that, let me also invite those of you who have joined us. If you have questions that you'd like to place in the chat, we'll get to as many of the questions as possible.
And I'm just glad you said your friend Avi, because I didn't think Avi had many friends. And Avi's muted, so he can't say much right now. And he's still muted.
Michal, can you help us? Okay.
There I go.
There
Okay.
it goes.
Jim, I think I read this morning in the Tennessean real quickly that Shelby initiated a community mask mandate.
I hadn't even had a chance to look at the paper
Yeah,
yet.
I think Shelby did, but who knows what the state will do in response.
Yeah.
Jim, my question has to do with an area that we have been discussing in the Jewish community out of ignorance. It has to do with COVID relief funding. We live in a state that raises our the hairs on our neck when we talk about relief for people in need. On the back of questionable judgment on the state's part about the use of TANF money, we now got, it's our understanding that there's an awful lot of money that came in for COVID relief. The CARES Act was the first round. That was about 150 billion nationwide. I think we got 6 billion. Then we've got emergency relief assistance money. We've got American Rescue Plan money. But as a public, we don't even know how much money Nashville has actually been allocated, where that money is housed, who's making the decisions on where that money goes. Is it getting in the hands of the people who need it the most? Is it being monitored? I hate to be skeptical, but it's one area that we don't seem to be transparent about. And yet there's billions of dollars in Nashville, literally billions of dollars. And we don't know what we don't even know where it's going. And so I've asked that question to other elected officials. They could not answer it. I probably should have gone to budget. They probably have most of the answers, but I should have done that. But I'm asking you, where is that money? How much do we have? Are we getting more? I think there's another 200 million coming to Nashville.
Yeah, so it's coming in different ways. And I'll try to be as clear as I can with all of it. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but we got the numbers you're talking about. First, the bigger numbers, Avi, are that's nationally, and then the state got money, and then the Nashville got some money out of that as well. We got some of the CARES Act funding. We got some other funding in there. We got Treasury relief funding that went for rental relief. And now we've got the Biden administration, some people call it ARPA funding, that's coming down as well. So I forget the overall amount. I'll try to take your questions bit by bit. I forget the overall amount of CARES Act funding that Nashville got. I can't answer the questions regarding the state funding. All I can do at this point is answer the questions about Nashville. There was a lot of money that came through the CARES Act that came down, but it had to be tied to COVID relief. Okay, this new wave of money doesn't necessarily have to be. The last group of money had to be tied for COVID relief. Here's how it worked. There was a committee set up, some appointed by the mayor, some members appointed by me, the vice mayor, to serve on a committee to look at how that money should be spent. And what they did was they spent it all out by December. They did it in certain amounts, about like $10 million here, $20 million here, that type of thing. For example, I think $10 million was given to United Way for relief for rental assistance and utilities. Other monies went to different things to try to help in terms of different situations. I know the last bit of money went, I think, to free up. It was actually used to pay some salaries for Metro, both in terms of, I think it was, actually had written it down. It was public health and safety salaries to free up money for other COVID aspects, such as paying for, I think, the testing and everything else that was going on in terms of trying to figure out how to keep everybody safe. What they did, and this is important for people who are interested, like you, as to how that money is determined how to be spent, is that this committee met publicly, and information was given to them about how to spend it. Now, you and other people probably on this call are like, Well, I think they should be spending it on this. How do you get that information to the committee? I can tell you the 3 members of the council committee, when I got requests that came in, I sent them directly to those members and said, hey, I got a request. Here it is. So the CARES Act money has been spent. Okay, we got that money out of here, but there's new money coming. And I think it's in the neighborhood, it's over 200 million. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 million.
Right.
That money hadn't been spent yet. Some of it the mayor may have said, well, we've got to use some of it for this and this, but there is money that's going to be coming down that's available. It's a 2-year funding source. Okay, so we won't get all of it at first. I think we get half of it this year and half of it next year. If you're interested in, first of all, making suggestions to how that money should be spent, whether it's on rental assistance, whether it's on anything else, 2 steps that I would recommend that you do. One is you should send your request into the finance department for Metro.
Love you.
Because they're the ones who are going to help lead the discussion on the committee. The second thing you should do is send a message to the committee members, and the 3 council committee members are it's Council Member Gamble, Council Member Johnston, and Council Member Sepulveda.
Wow.
Those are the 3. Okay, I think they may have met once since we just put together the newest committee, but that's how you get it in. That's how you get it before them in terms of the discussion. So again, CARES Act money spent. The new money somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 million, somewhere in that area. Again, in 2-year, not 2 installments of 250 million. It's split. If there are things that need to be done, that's how you get it before that group. Now, there's a whole nother, there's federal money flying all over the place, as you know. And it's important, hopefully somebody is being accountable for this. I know the money that got spent by United Way, we were watching that just to make sure that it went out, and it went out very, very quickly, as you may remember. There is a lot of money that came through, I think they call it the ERAP funding. It came from the Treasury Department, the federal government, and that money came in through a separate source. And that gets into your question about rental assistance and utility help. Okay. Overall, what I'm understanding is about $58 million has come in or will be coming in over a period of time. It's coming through MAC, which is the Metropolitan Action Commission. And people right now, if they're running into problems with evictions or rental assistance, what they're supposed to do is either go online and use the Hub Nashville, which is one way to get information in, or they're supposed to call the Metro Action Commission, and there is money available. Right now, I think the council just approved some funds. I think currently there's about $13 million that they're working off of. They've already spent 16 million and they've got more coming. So if there are people who need help during this period of time with the eviction moratorium lifted in Tennessee, those folks are supposed to call MAC and they can get help that way. Okay. So again, lots of money out there. I think one of the concerns that I think I've kind of understood from your questions, the questions I got in advance, was I think people are so confused about what's going on that they don't know where to call. And so I'm saying if you, I mean, first of all, if you forget everything, you can certainly call your council member, you can call me and we'll track it down for you and we'll figure out what's going on. It's a lot of stuff for us to hold on to as well. We don't know where all the money has flown to because it's all flying out of different places. But the rental assistance and the eviction stuff, the eviction assistance in terms of trying to get people to stay in their rental units, there is money available right now. You go through MAC to see if you can get it. It's called the HOPE program, HOPE, the HOPE program. That's where that money is. Okay.
Jim, just as a follow-up, I appreciate all this. I mean, I just learned a lot from you, and I read the papers every day. And a lot of this is new learning. I miss the 3 council people serving on your committee.
Sure. Jennifer Gamble, Sandra
Gamble,
Sepulveda.
yeah, and Johnston and Sepulveda.
That's it. Those are the three.
But, and this is new learning for me, maybe not for the other people on the call. We read about the difficulties MAC has had getting the money out there. And we read about the evictions starting to steam up again. We're not the only city having trouble getting that money out. New York got none of it out, we at all up until a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not blaming us more than any other city. But how do we fix that at MAC? Do they need more help? Do they need more? The money needs to get to people before they get kicked out of their homes?
Yeah. So a good question. I know THDA has, there was a story in the paper recently about the very small percentage of people who are getting help that way. I think that's going on nationally. But specifically, if you're talking about MAC, I'd heard that they might have been short-staffed, and there was a kind of an effort to get them more assistance to do this. Sometimes we're the last people to know. I like to say sometimes the vice mayor is usually the last person in the city to know most in anything. I have to dig just like everybody else sometimes. But if they're overwhelmed, if there's too much going on, we need to know, because obviously we can encourage the mayor to move resources around so that we get the right number of staffing over there to help. I mean, at this point, Avi, I'd say, just like with everybody else, it's still all hands on deck. And now, it's even more so with the Delta strain going through. We have to move quickly.
Yeah.
We don't have time to wait. And so you have to, there was a story that goes with this. Right as the pandemic started last April, when I was working at the Aging Commission, we had a guy from New York that had my peer in New York, and they had just gotten blasted with the pandemic. And what he said was, he said, at times like this, particularly if you're in government, you basically say, forget the bureaucracy. You go get it done. You can't wait. You can't screw around. You have to go quickly and get stuff done. You can always get forgiveness later, but you cannot wait on things like this. And so you're right. If people are having trouble, this is in real time. This is not, let's have a study and talk about it for a while. This is, we got to go now. So I would say that if any of you are running into problems, or if you know a problem, if you let me know, then we can dig into it and let's see if we can help.
I'll end my part of the questioning and turn back to Deb with one thought, and that is a scary one. And you mentioned it, if there's money flying in from different corners, we're not even sure how much or where from and where it's going. And we know people need it and need help. It's a little scary to hear about money flying around. We have people like you as good stewards, but around the country, gotta wonder where a lot of that money is going.
It's a good point. I mean, it's sort of, remember all the discussions when all that money first came out and there were giant corporations getting money, and they got caught doing it. They gave some of it back. Well, same thing here. I think there's obviously people are hurrying trying to get it out, but there has to be accountability for those funds. And at some point, somebody needed to go back behind it, which same thing for Metro. We need to go back behind it and make sure the money got to where it was supposed to go to.
Well, if I had a recommendation for the mayor, it would be that someone turn out a report summarizing much of what you've said for the public to see. It would be real helpful. The school district has gotten over 200 million of those dollars. We're not sure. They've aimed it at kids, picking up how kids were left behind. We're not sure how that money is used, but they put it in their budget so we could look for it. But it's hard to look at the Metro budget. So I would just recommend somebody tell the public what's going on. It would ease a lot of questions.
Well, Avi, I'll say, and for those of you watching, the vice mayor has limited power.
Right.
My job is to, my real job is to, based upon being vice mayor, is to run those city council meetings, which It's a real job these days. It's difficult, but my job is to run those meetings. But the two real powers of the vice mayor are probably twofold. One is that I have access to the mayor. I mean, I guess he could cut me off, but it probably doesn't make any sense to do it. And the vice mayor is not in the mayor's office, and we run completely separately. So I can disagree with him all I want, or I can agree with him. But I do see him once a week. So I just wrote down what you said. So that goes in. I'll take that in next Wednesday and tell him that. The other power of the vice mayor is that most of the department heads are nice to me because I could be mayor, which I'm not saying that I want to be. And we pray for Mayor Cooper's health every morning because it's a very tough job being mayor right now of any city. But most department heads are pretty nice to me because I could be their boss. So I'll pass this along to them. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Deborah, I'll turn back to you.
Okay, I'm going to turn towards some of the questions in the chat, several of which relate to mask mandates and specifically schools. So one is can there be a legal counter to Governor Lee's mask opt-out option for school-age children vis-a-vis the metro schools, given what the metro schools want to do? Where's the balance on that?
That's a very interesting question, and I'll answer the best way what I know now. I know that the issue has come up. Obviously, there has been kind of the governor issued his executive order. I think Dr. Battle responded back and said, "No, we're going to protect our kids, and this is what we're going to do." The DA, General Funk, said we're not arresting anybody for not for making sure that everybody was wearing the mask. And then there was this kind of give and take going back and forth between the city and the state. I'm sure that it has been looked at from a legal standpoint. I don't know how far that's gone, but I don't know. I don't know where that goes. And I'm not sure, because obviously the council doesn't overstep onto the school board except to give its money. I can't tell you from an inside perspective or where the school board may be on this. What I can tell you personally is that we're trying to figure out how to make this work in a very difficult situation, with the idea that the protection of people, particularly our children, has to be at this point the most important thing that we need to be worrying about. I mean, we got lots of issues, lots of concerns, but we're seeing kids show up in the hospitals in record numbers. We have got to figure out a way to make sure those kids are safe. And it's such a strange thing to be talking about from an overall standpoint. I think at some point there has to be, I don't know if it's cooler heads, but people have got to come together and look at the health data, the scientific information, and what I have to figure out and what we have to figure out overall. Because, and again, I'm sort of maybe talking a little bit in circles, but the state has more power than the local government. Obviously, if you paid any attention in civics class, the state has more power than the local government, and they can preempt things that we try to do. The federal government has more power than the state. So now you've got an interesting situation going on where we said everybody's going to wear masks. The governor came in and said, nope, parental choice. And now you've got the federal government going into the governor's office and saying, we think you may have violated federal law. So it's kind of I know who wins in the overall battle. If it's just purely federal over state over local, you back up to the feds, they win. Now, legally, everybody can sue each other. Forget all that for a second. Let's just keep our kids safe. Let's go back to the basic core and let's figure out a way. We can pass legislation, we can do all kinds of stuff, but in the end, I just want to make sure our kids are as safe as possible. And so how do we figure out a way to do that without political battles where people are starting to take authority away. That's why, some people would say, well, just pass a mask mandate. Well, I mean, we all know on this call that some people are not going to wear masks. They're not going to do it. And if you tell them to do it, they're specifically not going to do it. So how do you come up with something where we are finding a way to try to keep everybody safe? But right now with a particular focus on how to keep kids safe. So in answer to the question, I'm sure it's being looked at. I'm sure the state is looking at legal challenges, and they're trying to figure out what to do now with the feds. And the feds are probably looking at whether they're going to sue the state. Everybody's looking at all these legal challenges. It seems like such a simple act to just have kids in the classrooms. I know there may be health reasons, but these masks, do not cost that much. We've got plenty of them, and I just feel like we should err on the side of making sure that we do everything possible to keep children safe.
So sort of as a follow-up to that, there's another question in the chat regarding you've talked about masks in the city buildings, et cetera, but what about requiring vaccinations for city employees, teachers, police, similar to California? What is that being discussed at all?
I have not had a discussion with the mayor on that, and I'm not sure. I know the state took away some of the authority about, I believe this is right about, whether we could actually require coming into an event, whether you'd have to show a vaccination card. I was looking at that the other day, and it's my understanding the state may have taken that authority away. I may be wrong, but I'm double checking on that one. In terms of forcing vaccinations, that one I have not had discussions about with anybody in the health department and the mayor's office. Again, remember, I'm, vice mayor is part-time, so I'm not involved in all these discussions every day. But I've not had that discussion, so I don't know where that one is. And again, some of it may depend on what we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. Okay.
So this also sort of another question that sort of relates, which is why not just, as you were saying, why not just lead? Even if it then turns out you can't, like the question is why not have the mask requirement or have certain requirements, even if people won't necessarily follow it, why not go ahead and do it anyway?
I'll go ahead and pass a thing that says
to have something right, so that you're leading, and in the question it's phrased that just the same as not every we have speeding laws, not everyone follows it, but we still lead by having those laws. Why not have some of those requirements even if not everybody follows them?
It's a good question. The answer to that is more of a political question, and that is, all right, so we pass it. It's not complied with to some extent. No, that's part of the question. You go ahead and do it anyway. I think the concern is that the state then comes in, and they may come in and preempt the whole thing, and do even more to us, and we don't necessarily want that. What we want to do is be able to control as much of it as we can, so that if we really do want to require people, or we really do want people to wear masks. Our numbers are better overall than a lot of the areas in the state which chose not to get vaccinated. So we're trying, but I think there's this. Again, makes no sense in a period of a pandemic, but there's that political thing that you're watching to make sure that we don't lose any other authority to be able to handle our own situation, because we seem to have at least some of it under some control. So we don't want to, we're watching that as we go through it. And some people may go, well, we don't just pass it. We don't care what the state says. Well, if the state comes back in and then does other things to us and mandates that we have to do certain things, then did we pass something that really wasn't going to make a difference anyway, and then we get subjected to other penalties that we didn't expect. This is what's been really interesting, Deborah and everybody else, is I'm more used to. I was on the council for 8 years, as you said, as a district council member. Then I got off for 8 years. When I was on it the first time, there was a sense of camaraderie. It was people talking to each other. You work things out. You actually could sit down and talk to one another. Some of my best friends on the council back then were the more conservative members. I was seen as one of the more progressive members. Today, I don't know where I'd be saying, but yeah. So the idea was you tried to come up with solutions for the betterment of everything. We took a pandemic that was killing everyone. Doesn't care whether you're rich or poor, black or white, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. It was going after whoever it infected and impacted. And we couldn't sit down together and figure out how to deal with this as a nation. We have the ability still for our city leaders and the state leaders to sit down and figure this out so that we don't keep getting people sick and we don't lose people. There's a way to do it, and we don't keep fighting each other. I think we spend maybe sometimes too much time in the media challenging each other, and maybe we just need to all sit down. And that's been recommended, that maybe we just need to sit down. I've talked to the mayor about that, and on some other issues, but on this one, I don't want to have sessions of fighting against each other. We got people's lives at stake. I want to figure out how to deal with this.
Well, I don't want to speak for others on the call, but I'm guessing that most of us who live here would very much appreciate that. If the leaders could just sit down and speak civilly, logically, remove as much as possible the politics and just focus on the health crisis that we're facing, both as a city and a state and a country. So I think most of us would applaud that. Any version of that effort, we would applaud. I'm going to take 2 more questions from the chat and then turn it back over to Avi. This comes from Eric Stillman, the CEO of the Jewish Federation. Are there current guidelines, limits as to the maximum number of people for gatherings in Davidson County?
Nothing has changed since a while back. So as far as I know, I had a discussion with the mayor on this one, and I said, what are we thinking about doing? And he said, at that point, it was like, we put everything out there. People know what they're supposed to do. They know how to be careful. So at that point, there was no indication of pulling anything back. Now, Eric, what I'm not sure about, but I could get you the information, is we kept reducing. We were at that, you can only maybe see 5 people in this room, and then we broadened it to 25. Then it got bigger, and then people could have their weddings again and other stuff. What I wasn't sure, what I don't know right now, is we were at some point where I thought we were at like level 3, and then we were going to go to level 4, but I don't know if we ever got to level 4. I think we were stuck at the next level, and then everything just kind of opened up, but I don't know whether we ever took all the restrictions off. It seems like we did. I mean, there's stuff everywhere, but that's what I don't know. We haven't moved anywhere back since where we got to. So whatever we were, 3 months ago, we have not pulled anything back. Now, that's not to say that, on this, I'm sitting here talking to you, there's a press conference that the mayor's getting ready to have where he starts pulling something back. But I don't think, I talked to him Wednesday, and as far as I know, there is no discussion at this point about restricting anything. Always remains an option. Obviously, it has to, because you don't know what may happen. Okay.
Another question from the chat from Felicia Anchor. Does the fact that we have so many teaching hospitals here help us in our implementation of emergency response? Can we utilize some of those teaching hospitals in response to the medical emergency?
Yeah, so they have been, I think we are one of the fortunate places, just like some other places like Boston and New York and probably LA, that had a series of teaching hospitals that put us in very good shape. Obviously, you've seen a number of our head medical doctors, Meharry, Vanderbilt, so forth, that have either been on national committees or become national spokespeople for this, dealing with the pandemic, which has made us a place to turn to for information. Now, the fact that we have teaching hospitals have also allowed us to, I think, have some abilities to deal with this. I know Vanderbilt, particularly early on, was testing. They were involved in a lot of the testing that was going on in terms of the vaccinations. So it's made our profile bigger. It's made us a place to watch, and it's obviously helped us during the pandemic. If you noticed, with Dr. Jahangir, Dr. Hildreth, Dr. Schaffner, those guys, they were extremely helpful to the city in terms of dealing with this overall situation. So we already had Dr. Hildreth, we already had Dr. Schaffner. What we got lucky with was Dr. Jahangir, who now many people know who he is. The way he ended up being front and center on all this stuff was he was put on the health board, and he was chairman of the Board of Health for Metro Davidson County. It wasn't like we went and grabbed him. He just happened to be the lucky person that happened to be elected chair before the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden he was thrust into the position of being head of the Board of Health for Metro. And he basically had to step up, and we got lucky. First of all, that he was there at the right time. And second of all, that he could step up. Those guys have been, besides the rest of our healthcare workers and all those frontline folks, have been amazing in this process. We were pretty lucky overall.
Okay, Avi, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, Jim, we know you're on a tight schedule. You got another important meeting coming up, but I wanted to close with
hours. Avi, I've got hours. No, I can stay until 1, so I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Avi. Yes, we have the full time till 1.
And for you, I'll stay until 5 after 1.
So, Jim, let me bring you to a little bit of a broader question. You're one of our rock stars. You have always worked in city government for the betterment of everyone, and in your private life worked for nonprofits and for the people that need us the most. And you still do with your new job appointment. But I'm going to ask you, it's interesting, you meet with the mayor every Wednesday. I know the mayor meets with his department heads once a week, or at least, close to once a week. Early before COVID, we passed a covenant through council that you helped shepherd through. And it was more of a moral statement about city government's responsibility to those who need us the most. And it was a broad statement, but it was passed pretty much overwhelmingly by the council after discussion, and you shepherded and stewarded it. Wondering if that covenant shouldn't be part of each of your Wednesday conversations with the mayor, if it shouldn't be a part of his conversations with his department head, because the impression we get, and rightfully, we're proud of Nashville, and the economic growth of the city is enormous. What's not to be proud of? But the conversation is mostly on economic growth. And the conversation doesn't seem to be centered on how do we take care of the people in the lower half that are struggling while economic growth is occurring. So just wondering if that covenant shouldn't be resurrected. Should it be in your conversation? Should it be on the council table? And I'll share the covenant with anyone in this group that wants to see it. But it's a nice document. It doesn't put people on a spot. It's a nice document. Question to me, Jim, is to what degree should city government take on the responsibility of helping those who are most in need?
I think it's probably the most important thing that we should be doing. You said a lot of nice things about me. Thank you. But I will tell you that the government, as much as we all may be happy about most of the economic growth in Nashville and all the people that like to come and visit us and all that other stuff, government is, I mean, to me, should be much more focused on the people and the issues that you're talking about. So the discussions, without sharing all the details, the discussion with the mayor on Wednesday, it was about safety of people with COVID, which is, not worried about big projects or economic development. It was COVID. It was homelessness, because we have issues floating around, particularly with some of the encampments. It was homelessness. And it was about some of the, particularly some of the increase in crimes, particularly around issues regarding Demonbreun Hill, which is where some of those things, some things happened over the weekend, and areas that need to be pushed. Now, so I'm not, I mean, I know that there are big projects in the works, but I'm not as interested in that as I am in the things that affect more of how our city grows as a city, not just in terms of economic development. Avi, I will tell you that when we get economic development discussions on the floor, there are efforts by people, including council members, about, okay, so you're talking about a big economic development push. How does that impact other individuals, and how do you decrease the widening gap of wealth and everything else? How do we do a better job of helping people who maybe could use the assistance instead of helping people who probably don't need the assistance? I'm happy to bring up the covenant again. I'm happy to have those discussions with the mayor. I'm happy to have those discussions with the council. It hasn't been, this last year and a half has not been very easy. There's, I would say that a lot of the bad habits that were going on in Washington filtered down this way. And I'd much rather have a group of people all trying to figure out how to work together to figure out how to solve issues than fighting among each other. That doesn't help us very much. I told the mayor the other day, I've said this a couple of times, I mean it in the right way. It's in terms of government or the city, it's really the little things that matter. So I'll explain it this way, even though you're talking about some bigger issues, it's some of the bigger, when I talk about bigger issues, I'm talking about, let's just take the Oracle deal. Okay, glad they're coming, spending a tremendous amount of money in, but not everybody in the city is going to be impacted by Oracle. You know, they're not going to be in their offices. They're not going to be, they're not impacted. But if you were to put some, if we were to speed up our traffic calming and get some speed humps in some different neighborhoods, that's going to have a much bigger impact on Nashvillians than on those individuals than the Oracle deal is going to have on those same individuals, because those same individuals are never going to go near the Oracle facility. But you put speed humps on their street and you're going to make a difference in their lives because you've done something that impacts them. The same thing can be said overall with the issues like, you know, how better do we protect our children? How do we deal with increase in serious crimes, particularly juvenile crime? You know, more impacts in terms of like violence interruptions and things like that. I'm all for trying new programs. I think the money that went in this year to give the violence interrupters some assistance and give them a chance to make a difference is key. We have a lot of the same things we've been doing for years that don't work. So we got to try some different things. But you can't, I guess in the long answer to your question, it's the focus has to be less on, we'll have big projects and we'll have big economic growth, great for the city. But we got other things that to me are as important that we need to be focused on.
So I've got another question in the chat that sort of broadens this lens even more, this idea of helping people in an emerging humanitarian crisis. This question comes from Debbie Gould. Given the state's anti-immigration stance, are you hearing any discussion of placement of Afghan refugees in Nashville?
A good question, Debbie. I got that question last night. Somebody sent it in to me and said, and I hadn't had a chance to find out to see, I have not heard anything about that. And I don't know where that will stand. My guess would be that could be more of a state issue in terms of allowing people in, but I hadn't heard it mentioned from a city issue, but it came in last night. I don't know the answer to it, but when it came in last night, I sent the personal response and said, I'm going to look into it today. I hadn't had a chance to, but it's a good question. Gee, that's so scary as well.
I know we're getting close on time. Just wanted to get your thoughts on the possible redistricting. I'm going to put in the chat. There's a link here for those that are interested. There is a survey that you can fill out. It does not. I filled it out myself. It does not take a lot of time, but it just to sort of get people's views on what should be considered in terms of that. Just wondering, Jim, your thoughts on this possible redistricting.
So there's at least two, actually several redistrictings going on. The council districts are being redistricted right now as well. So the new census numbers came out, and so they're having to redraw the council member districts. That's one thing, and we just have to do that by law. And I know everybody's the planning department is working, I think, with the council and everybody else to try to figure out how those lines are going to be drawn. A lot of that just impacts, it depends on where the city grows and where lines have to be done. When I was a district council member, though, we had to do the same thing. And when I ran in 4,000 years ago, when I ran in 1999, I was in the center of my district. And after 4 years, I was on the western edge of my district. I think they were, Avi, I think they were trying to draw me out of my own district. They want to run me out of there. So I had to save my district. I said, can I have my street in my own district? And they said, yeah, we'll let you do that. So it depends. That depends on just the demographics, and everybody tries to do the best they can. We'll see. We'll see. We have not seen the final plan yet as to what happens. The state then starts drawing the state legislative districts. And I've heard different things. Obviously, we have a supermajority Republican House and Senate, so they can draw it basically the way they want. I'm not sure of where that's going to go. I hear that they may draw people together in districts so that some people have to run against each other, or they draw people out of their districts or whatever. Don't know yet. That's politics. That's how some of that works. What I am concerned about is the redrawing of our congressman. Jim Cooper's been our congressman for many, many years. I think the world of him. I don't necessarily always agree with everything he does, but I would think that people shouldn't. I mean, that's just part of it. But he's good and decent and honest, and he's a man of integrity. And that's what I want in somebody in a public office. I want somebody I can count on, and who's gonna step up and do what needs to be done on behalf of the city. What I'm concerned about is them drawing him either into somebody else's district or splitting up Nashville. Nashville as a whole. It's been a long time since I looked at that, but I think most congressional districts particularly are drawn, they don't split up cities so that we get quartered. So we have 4 different congressmen representing Nashville. That makes it very difficult to represent the interests of this city. And I hope they do not do that. We want good people in office. We don't want, I'd rather the city not be split. That makes it so much more difficult. So that's kind of where we are with drawing.
So by definition, those that have made time for this call, first of all, thank you again for making time for us. We know that you do calls on Saturdays, and as you know, for certain members of the Jewish community, that's not possible. So we appreciate you making time on a Friday, and I hope that we'll be able to do it again in the not too distant future. But for those of us that are concerned citizens, what are the top 1 or 2 things you would recommend for us to be doing to bring the city to the places that we'd like to see it become?
Okay. So, and I will say on those Zoom calls on Saturday, they're recorded and you can watch them on YouTube. I watch myself all the time. No, I do the Zoom call and I go do something else and hope that I didn't mess anything up too bad. We're in such an interesting time. I didn't say it was a great time. It's an interesting time to be engaged. I mean, the country seems divided. I say this a lot. After 9/11, this country came together like no other time I'd ever seen, where people actually started behaving themselves and all of a sudden realized that there were more important things to life than all their personal stuff, that this was, we had to come together as a nation. We did for 6 months, and then we went back to where we were before, and it's been building ever since. And now here comes a pandemic, and it's like, okay, another basically attack on people in this country in terms of a virus that you can't see. Let's pull together and defeat it, because that's what we're supposed to do. And instead, I think it's more split than it was because of something that's dangerous. So I think it's a good time for people to start. Obviously, I know there's groups out there trying to work together, but it's a good time to be heard, because I think we're, if the bodies are fighting, the political bodies are fighting, then people have to step up on the outside and say, we're just letting you know how we feel. Okay. So you can always contact your governor. You can always contact your representatives or senators. You can contact your council members, the mayor, the vice mayor. The benefit of a large council, whether you like it or not, is that most of the time you're probably, within 15 minutes of at least one council member, because we come home at night and you can find us. We're not always as accessible as we should be, but we're around and you can find us. So I talk to a lot of people in the grocery store. I go to the Publix over in the Belmead area. I love that Publix. I know the people who work in there, so I go in there. People stop me and talk to me about issues. It's okay. You can do that. We have a chance. We have a public comment period. Actually, at both of our council meetings, we meet the first and the third Tuesdays. The first one is zoning. So if you're upset about a zoning issue, you come and talk about that one. The second meeting, you can sign up for public comment. You get 2 minutes, which isn't a lot of time. But last time we had 6 people sign up. 2 people, at least 2, talked about masks and about the pandemic. And they specifically sent messages into us because there's only 6 people, we're all turning around listening to them so you can get a message across. Avi, I've told groups before, if we have 10 slots for that public comment period, they usually never get taken up. I've always said that if you want to get a message in, and Avi, I don't know if you could probably get your message in within 2 minutes, probably would take you more like 30 or 45 minutes, but you could have 5 people lined up and you get your message across in 10 minutes. You just follow one another up there and say, I'm talking about this part and I'm talking about this part. We actually keep up most of the time with the emails coming in. We may not be able to respond to all of them, but when we get a slew of emails on something, and you can go to the nashville.gov, look for Metro Council, and there's a way to send an email to all of us. You blast email all of us. If you do it in large numbers, you'll get your message across. So you can come to the council, you can contact us, you can call us, you can contact the mayor, or you can tell Avi things that you want me to take into the mayor, because I have 5 things now, and I take them in. I actually do take them in and I talk to them about it. So,
And Jim, the one thing else that this group would subscribe to, and you would, as your new post at Safe Haven, is our city delivers almost all of its social service through small nonprofits.
Mhm.
And we all fight for the same donor dollars. We've got to figure a better way that the city can support these small nonprofits and coalesce the donor dollar, because we're really doing city's work in small nonprofits.
that's a conversation for like a whole nother hour. I will tell you this. So when obviously I'm at Safe Haven, I just moved over here. It's been very interesting. Safe Haven does shelters and finding homes for families that are experiencing homelessness. I noticed pretty quickly on, I've noticed for a long time, that the organizations dealing with homelessness don't necessarily talk to each other. And so there's an effort being made for me to meet with a bunch of the different groups. And then at some point, we're going to call them all together, not for the purpose of fighting between each other, hopefully, but the idea is to make sure everybody knows who everybody is and that we all should be working together. We'll see how that works.
We appreciate that, and we hope that you'll include us in the call together of the various nonprofits working on behalf of the community, because we definitely consider ourselves to be one of those groups doing what we can from our end to help the city and our own community. I thank you again. We are right up at time, and so we appreciate you staying on the full time. And I hope I'll be able to work with your staff, and hopefully we can schedule another one of these calls at a later date. But in the meantime, thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for your time. And I appreciate the ideas and thoughts of how we continue to stay engaged and make our voices heard.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to get back on anytime. Okay.
And a happy new year, Jim.